pharmaceutical industry, like any other industry, like the food industry or even the housing industry, is a commercial industry and it's highly competitive. And so promotion of all sorts is part of the commercial package that the companies put forward.
This video commercial is advertising the advantages of a particular pain-relieving drug to doctors. Every year, the drug industry spends nearly £150 million promoting its products to GPs.
Backsprung jerk technique, as they say in Germany.
The prescriptions doctors write determine the industry's profits. But information about drugs needs to be accurate and standards of promotion need to be high.
Promotion by the pharmaceutical industry determines how doctors prescribe. Now, if that promotion is misleading, patients might suffer, both by having a drug when they don't need it, or because the drug actually is dangerous.
I think the standards are very high indeed. It is, after all, really quite counterproductive to have anything other than the highest possible standards. I think that any industry which didn't have the highest standards would be in jeopardy.
The drug industry has been allowed to regulate itself by successive governments. Tonight, World in Action investigates some of its more questionable methods of promotion and asks, should the industry be allowed to police itself? This is Dr. Christopher Saxby-Good. He's the medical director of Roussel UK, the British end of one of the world's most powerful drug companies, Hoechst. Roussel and Dr. Good are soon to appeal a conviction of consenting and conniving to mislead family doctors about an anti-arthritis drug called Sergam. All arthritis painkillers can cause bleeding in the patient's stomach. The claim for Sergam was that this risk was reduced. Roussel's misleading promotion was to have serious consequences.
I was actually very excited because there could be nothing better than having a new aspirin-like drug which actually didn't cause trouble in the stomach and small intestine. I mean, we know that they can cause bleeding. What an advance that would be. And obviously, when one sees a claim like that, one needs to know, because clearly I would be the first person to be prescribing that drug if it truly was an improvement.
No. Okay. Perhaps you can just sit up, actually, for the moment.
That improvement is what Britain's 8 million arthritis sufferers have been waiting for. They make up one of the largest groups of patients seeing doctors in the UK. Millions of prescriptions for arthritis painkillers are written by family doctors every year. To meet the demand, the industry offers more than 60 different preparations. They're all remarkably similar.
The anti-arthritis market is the largest market in this country. It's worth around 100 to 200 million pounds per year in this country alone, multiplied many times when one considers the whole world. If you just get 1 or 2% of 200 million pounds, you're making a lot of money for the company.
Roussel wanted to break into this lucrative market, but how to get doctors to prescribe Sergam instead of its competitors?
All the companies that bring new products to this particular market are looking for an advantage over existing therapies. In order to claim any particular advantage over other products, they had to find a USP, that is a unique selling point, to get the attention of the prescribers that this drug was in some way different or better than the competitors.
Roussel's unique selling point for Sergam was selective prostaglandin inhibition, SPI. The claim was that the drug offered a new way of using the body's own natural defences to provide gastric protection and so reduce the risk of internal bleeding.
To claim that an anti-inflammatory drug gives gastric protection is a highly significant claim that would have given them a major advantage in commercialising the drug.
It was significant for patients as well, had it been correct, I presume?
Certainly, it would have been a major benefit for patients. Most of these anti-inflammatory drugs do cause gastric upsets.
While Roussel were publicly claiming Sergam offered gastric protection, privately a company memo warned,
"We should anticipate credibility problems."
But early market research indicated that the Sergam ad was getting across. 90% of GPs shown the ad later remembered the claim for gastric protection. Roussel concluded,
"We have identified a credible product difference in a highly volatile market."
Roussel's belief that they'd identified a credible product difference was to be tested here at the Royal Free Hospital in London. Dr. Paresh Dandona's research unit was intrigued by the Sergam ad.
If the claim was true, it would be a scientific breakthrough. So we contacted Roussel to determine what scientific work had been undertaken to establish that particular claim, and they were extremely cooperative, and they immediately sent us relevant papers for us to look at. But what we found in the papers did not suggest or sustain the claim that Roussel had actually made in the advertisement.
So was the original work on which Roussel based their claim work carried out on human beings or not?
No, they were on animal models, very highly specific animal models, which are of interest in experimental and investigative work, but which cannot necessarily allow us extrapolation into the human being.
Okay, goodness me, it hurts to see you do it.
Clinical pharmacologist Joe Collier was also intrigued by Roussel's claim. He examined the work that had been done on Sergam.
The evidence that the company had and the evidence that we could find didn't support the concept that in man there was any advantage of this drug over other equivalent new generation or second generation products, that it could cause gastrointestinal bleeding like the others could. And therefore we believed that the claim that there was gastric protection was untenable.
Surely you're not suggesting that Sergam is a more dangerous drug than the other anti-arthritis drugs?
No, I'm not suggesting it's more dangerous, but these drugs are troublesome, are difficult to use, can cause problems, and Sergam is one of those.
Another study of the Sergam claim had been set up by Dr. Chris Lote at Birmingham University's Medical School. He offered to test Sergam for Roussel, but his findings were also to prove disappointing.
We came to the conclusion that Sergam was a perfectly good non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, very similar in its actions to many others on the market, with no selectivity that we could detect at all. In other words, it was very much like the others.
Did you then think that the claim that had been made was unjustified?
Yes, I did.
It wasn't just the scientists who were worried by the claim. So was Syntex, one of Roussel's competitors. They market one of the top anti-arthritic drugs in the UK, naproxen. They were worried that while Sergam had been on the market for just 12 weeks, it had captured more than £1 million worth of business. Syntex, who themselves have been censured for a misleading claim, complained to Roussel. The pressure on the company continued to build. Dr. Dandona had been commissioned by Roussel to test Sergam against another commonly used anti-arthritis drug, indomethacin.
What we discovered within the first few weeks of setting up our investigation was that Sergam did not have any more a selective mode of action than indomethacin, or for that matter, any other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug.
The criticisms from Syntex and the findings of Drs. Dandona and Lote came at a bad time for Roussel. The company were preparing to launch a stronger version of the Sergam drug, Sergam 300, in the spring of 1983, and the Roussel marketing team wanted to use the same promotional claim for gastric protection. But Dr. Good was required by law to certify that any claim reflected the current state of scientific knowledge. He wrote in an internal memo,
"In the unlikely event of our being able to demonstrate any real difference in prostaglandin inhibition between Sergam and indomethacin, and in view of the criticism of our advertising by Syntex, I think we should seriously consider modifying our promotional platform."
Dr. Good's memo received this response from Roussel's marketing department.
I am concerned that we would consider withdrawing our material at this stage. We have a difference of scientific opinion. We must not react prematurely.
With the deadline of the launch approaching, Dr. Good wrote to all the scientists who'd looked at Sergam for Roussel, inviting them to a meeting at the company's head office. Once again, he asked the scientists if there was any way that the claim for gastric protection could be justified.
An overwhelming majority, in fact, agreed that the claim of a selective beneficial effect for Sergam could not be sustained, and that in terms of reality, on part of Roussel, that the advertisement and the claims associated with this advertisement be withdrawn.
But the advertisement did appear. For 2 months before the scientists met, Dr. Good had already given his approval for the misleading claim to appear. When his own medical department questioned his decision to approve the advertisement, Dr. Good wrote,
I know of no data to contradict our promotional platform.
When his medical department pointed out that this was not true, he changed this to,
I know of no published data.
This still didn't satisfy them, so Dr. Good changed his words again to read,
I know of no published, convincing, final data.
Many medical directors are well qualified and very professional in their jobs, but the pressures they're under are enormous. They are salaried employees of the company, they have pension rights within the company. It's asking a bit too much to expect them to be totally objective in making decisions about the company's promotional material.
I am very, very impressed indeed by the calibre of medical directors that we have within industry. I've met a lot of them now. I am well satisfied that they are able to resist the pressures from the marketing and from other departments.
In one case, working for a company, the company put forward a strategy with which I didn't agree, but I was never formally asked whether I agreed with this strategy. At the end of the day, I would have had to approve the advertising. Someone on the commercial side actually said, do you realise that your decision is going to cost the company a lot of money?
In this case, Dr. Gurlis won the battle and resisted the temptation to bow to commercial pressure. But if a company insists on having its way, the medical director is in a difficult position.
What options are available to a medical director when he comes under these pressures?
He has only two options. He either signs the promotional material or resigns.
The dangers of misleading promotion should have been apparent to anyone. 27 years ago, an anti-nausea drug was advertised as being specially suitable for pregnant women. The drug was called Distaval, but it's better known today as thalidomide. More recently, another anti-arthritis drug called Opren was given a major publicity launch, claiming a novel action. Opren was on the market for less than 2 years. In that time, doctors reported more than 80 deaths of patients who'd been prescribed the drug. It was later withdrawn.
We fell for it. Because Opren seemed to have advantages, we would go for that. And the advantages were based upon promotional information, to some extent, that the drug had these unique actions, which the other drugs didn't have. So we actually fell for it.
The Medicines Division of the DHSS is responsible for monitoring drug promotion, but they have just 4 civil servants to check £150 million worth of promotion by the industry every year. Roussel's conviction was the first time the department have acted against a large company. Traditionally, they've preferred to devolve responsibility to the industry's trade association, the ABPI, and its Code of Practice Committee. It's made up of 17 members. Only 3 are from outside the industry.
There is on it 2 independent doctors who come from outside, nothing to do with industry, and the committee is chaired by a QC, who again has nothing to do with industry. Obviously, any trade organisation or trade association running a code of practice for a particular industry will be dominated by members of that industry. But I think that the independent members of that committee ensure that it is not too introspective.
This is a group of people appointed by the industry itself, policing the industry without any public accountability, and who would wish to almost sweep under the carpet any claims, any complaints. There's no wish for them for complaints to go to law.
If a member company breaks the Code of Conduct Committee's rules, what sanctions are available?
I think really in practice the most important sanction is the adverse publicity which this generates. Don't forget that we do publish in the Pharmaceutical Journal and in Script, which I must admit goes to companies, but we do publish details of all those cases where a company has been found in breach of the Code of Practice.
But the ABPI's own records show that this important sanction has only been in operation since 1983. For the first 25 years, the committee's investigations were held in secret. Offending companies were not even named in the association's reports.
It does mean, though, that prior to 1983, there was no real sanction.
We're improving all the time. This is something which I think is very important to perceive. Yes, there were real sanctions. It's wrong to say that there were no sanctions at all. There was the sanction of the strain of the individual, and there was the sanction of ultimately, of suspension or expulsion.
Have you ever expelled a company?
We have never expelled a company. We have suspended a company.
Roussel declined to appear in this programme because of the pending appeal against their conviction. But what action have the ABPI taken against them?
As soon as it was drawn to the attention of the ABPI, it was known, it was noted that this was something which was being investigated by the DHSS.
But the DHSS didn't, in fact, begin their investigation for a year after the advertisement appearing.
Our information was that the DHSS, as they were investigating this particular case, and as the company had withdrawn this particular advertisement, was something which we were leaving at that stage to the DHSS to pursue.
Would it be true to say that the ABPI have taken no action against that member company?
Because that case has been handled by the DHSS and is still under appeal, no decision has been taken as to what happens, because this has not been considered until there is a judgment finally made.
Roussel was convicted of publishing its misleading claim in magazines seen by doctors. Other charges against the company were dropped. The latest government figures on the side effects of anti-arthritis drugs show that in the last 5 years, doctors have reported 45 cases of serious internal bleeding and 6 deaths of patients who had been prescribed Sergam. Roussel dropped their misleading advertisement at the end of June 1983, but a company memo of March that year allowed Roussel reps to go on making the claim in visits to doctors until the end of August. Doctors from the north of England were treated to a day out by Roussel at this international golf tournament in York in August 1983. Roussel sales reps had the opportunity to put their misleading message about Sergam directly to doctors in this convivial atmosphere. Roussel is not the only company to recognise how effective a rep can be in getting a message across.
Journal advertising just creates awareness among doctors, but the actual act of prescribing usually results after a visit from a sales representative.
The influence of sales reps over doctors is widely acknowledged.
Hello, I've got an appointment with Dr. O'Shea.
Felicity Newton-Sims is a rep employed by a group of NHS pharmacists who have borrowed the methods of the drug industry to improve the prescribing habits of GPs in Leeds. The industry's code of practice is supposed to cover this area of promotion as well.
If doctors who are the recipients of advertisements or of visits from reps are not happy, then they are able to let us know and we take appropriate action and we investigate that contravention of the code of practice.
If there's a trick, a loophole, a drug company will use it.
This man does not wish to be identified because he wants to work as a salesman again. He worked as a drug rep for 4 years and has direct experience of what can happen when reps are promoting products to doctors. His last employer was Bayer UK, the British end of the German multinational. After training at head office, he went out on the road.
The attitude I experienced was, you know, you've been in head office, now let's learn the real game. And it was whilst I was out with my senior rep, I was first introduced to what has become known as bogus trials or unofficial assessments.
These are some of the products that Bayer reps promoted to doctors using unofficial assessments. Under the guise of genuine medical research, doctors were improperly induced to put patients on these drugs. To make it look genuine, the doctors were given cards to record the patient's reactions. But these trials were bogus. They were just a device to get patients onto Bayer's products rather than those of their competitors.
What did you do with the sheets that the doctor had filled in on your behalf?
I just kept them.
Didn't you return them to the company for research purposes?
They were nothing to do with head office.
So a trial was being carried out, but the results were never being processed?
Yeah, trial in a sense was being carried out, but this was just a sales promotion activity. It was nothing to do with the medical research department or anything like that.
When these bogus trials came to light, the ABPI launched an investigation and suspended Bayer, but that's not something they appear happy to discuss in public.
The company had been undertaking certain studies which I really don't want to talk about in this particular instance, because I would rather talk in general terms rather than about an individual case.
What kind of inducements were you offering to them to prescribe?
Basically, it was about £15 a patient. That was put on it for 3 months.
Doctors didn't always want cash in return for prescribing Bayer products, as internal Bayer memoranda make clear.
Dear David, Dr. L has completed his Adalat assessment. He requires some photographic equipment for medical purposes. I enclose the invoice Dr. L obtained from Dixon's.
Dear Alan, I enclose an Adalat assessment from MB. Please could you arrange for his remuneration to be in Debenham's vouchers?
I was in with this GP and by that time I'd been trained to have a good patter in introducing this unofficial assessment idea. And he said he wouldn't mind going for television because apparently his son had borrowed his or something. So, you know, we just kind of negotiated between ourselves until we came up with the right figure of how many patients it would require.
Did anyone from head office ask what on earth you were doing, giving a GP a colour television?
No.
Sometimes doctors didn't wait for Bayer to approach them.
Dear John, today Dr. N asked me if Bayer will sponsor his trip to the American Dermatological meeting in December. I agreed as long as he was prepared to put 20 patients on Adalat retard. He agreed to this.
Dear John, this is to confirm that Dr. S, who has asked for sponsorship to the American Dermatological meeting in December, has agreed to put 20 patients on Adalat retard.
Normally it was a kind of semi-blackmail situation. I'm a big prescriber for your drugs. If you don't prescribe, if you don't send me to wherever it is, Africa, America, I'll stop.
What the representatives were doing in this case was something which would not satisfy an individual doctor if he understood what was actually happening, because the doctors in good faith were producing data which they believed was going to be properly assessed. I think that the doctors concerned, had they realised what was happening, would have notified us straight away.
How many doctors, in your own experience, would do this sort of thing?
Well, the unofficial assessments, generally. Whew. As a percentage, 10 to 20%.
How many doctors were you seeing in total?
In my area at the time, I had around about 670 GPs.
So we're talking about, what, 50 doctors?
Easily, yeah.
Bayer's apparent generosity was a good investment. Once prescribed a heart drug like Adalat retard, a patient was likely to be given the Bayer product for life. The row over Bayer's improper activities has a particular significance. Bayer told the ABPI investigators,
These unofficial assessments had been developed locally by staff acting on their own initiative. The practice had not been company policy and had not occurred on a national basis.
But World in Action has evidence which suggests that this was not the case.
Were you doing this sort of thing, unofficial assessments, bribes to doctors, off your own bat?
Certainly not. I was instructed in it in my training week in the field by a senior rep, and I was later given official training by the man who became the marketing manager.
In fact, Bayer's own documents show that over a number of years, senior executives like Peter Merriman, National Sales Manager, and Dr. Golan, a visiting executive from the German parent company, saw documents referring explicitly to improper inducements. As early as 1982, product manager Jerry Cole was writing to all Bayer reps, area managers and regional managers, reminding them of the company policy.
All these unofficial assessments should be retained by yourselves.
This is an internal memo from Bayer UK from 1982, and you'll see it's marked, there's a reference to unofficial assessments. This is a document that was seen by and actually came from a senior executive and seen by other senior executives in Bayer. Bayer told the ABPI that this was not a company policy. This appears to contradict it. Has the ABPI seen this document before?
I think, in actual fact, with great respect, what you're saying is totally irrelevant. Quite irrelevant. We have taken action against the company because we believed that what the company was doing was bringing the industry into disrepute. The actual individual details, I don't think, are worth pursuing, or are right to pursue on this sort of in this sort of interview.
We believe it's relevant, though, to find out if the ABPI were told the truth by the company. I'm asking if the ABPI are aware of this document. We have others which suggest that this was a national policy and was not a one-off.
Eamon, I've said on a number of occasions that I'm not prepared to talk about individual cases. I'm talking about principles. As far as this particular case is concerned, we satisfied ourselves that there was a contravention of the code and we took appropriate action.
Appropriate action has been a long time coming. In the 29-year history of the ABPI, Bayer are the first and only company to be suspended. But suspension or even expulsion can't stop Bayer from promoting their products in whatever manner they choose. In the last 3 years alone, Bayer has been found in breach of the ABPI code 5 times for its dubious methods of promotion. And this is the 3rd time since 1983 that Bayer were held to have brought discredit upon the industry.
Can you still assert that the ABPI is a proper body to regulate the industry?
Absolutely. There are 150 member companies of the ABPI. The companies that you have cited themselves will tell you, and I believe in good faith, wish to subscribe to the provisions of the code. Indeed, Bayer have undertaken to do so in the last possible case, and I am sure Well, I know that every company wishes to fulfil the highest standards of the code and to subscribe to it.
Earlier this year, Minister of Health Tony Newton re-emphasised his department's confidence in the high standards of promotion in the drugs industry and in the ability of the ABPI to keep its house in order. To date, the ABPI have taken no action against Roussel. And Bayer, while currently suspended from membership, hope to be reinstated within the next month.